The first time I saw the red Dodge Ram parked across my driveway, I thought it was a mistake. The second time, I knew it wasn't. That morning, I was already running late. I had a vet appointment for my old golden retriever, Max, who hated car rides and made it very clear by barking at full volume. I grabbed my keys, stepped outside, and there it was again, that same monster truck, casually sprawled across the only exit from my garage. I froze. The audacity of it burned into me like a hot coal. My driveway, my private property, was completely blocked for the second time in 3 days. I knocked on the door across the street. The new guy, Brad, answered shirtless, holding a protein shake like he was starring in his own energy drink commercial. "Hey man," I said, trying to keep calm. "Your truck is blocking my driveway again. Mind moving it?" He didn't even blink. "Yeah, I'll get to it later." He closed the door before I could say another word. No apology. No urgency. No respect. "My name's Tom Reynolds. I'm a retired firefighter, the kind of guy who waves at the mailman, keeps his lawn sharp, and never misses a trash day. I've lived on this quiet cul-de-sac in Maplewood Hills for 22 years. We've always had the kind of neighborhood where folks borrow sugar and watch each other's kids. Until Brad moved in. He came in loud, literally. His housewarming party lasted until 3 a.m. the first night, complete with fireworks, and some guy doing donuts in a golf cart on someone else's lawn. But the worst offense wasn't the noise. It wasn't the overflowing trash or the impromptu gym he set up in his front yard. It was the driveway blockade. Every few days, his red truck would show up again, brazenly angled across my exit like it belonged there. I tried being civil. I left notes. I asked nicely, 3 different times. Each time I got the same lazy brush off. One day, I found a note taped to my garage door in childlike block letters. "It's a public street. Deal with it." That was the moment I knew I was dealing with someone who didn't care about rules, boundaries, or respect. At first, I considered just living with it. I told myself, it's not worth the fight. But then Max got sick and I couldn't get him to the vet in time. That night, as I sat on the porch with Max's head resting in my lap and the glow of Brad's floodlights beaming into my living room, I made a promise. If he wanted a battle over a driveway, then I'd give him one. And I wasn't going to fight it alone. The next morning, I got up early, determined to beat Brad to the punch. I moved my car out to the curb before his truck could box me in again. For a few blissful hours, I thought I was finally one step ahead. Then I came home from the grocery store to find something new. Brad had put up orange cones along the sidewalk in front of my house. Just sitting there, no explanation, no construction, just cones like he was reserving space, on my curb. I knocked again. This time, he didn't answer. Instead, I saw him watching from his upstairs window, smirking like it was all some twisted game. I moved the cones to the side and parked where I normally would. 10 minutes later, I found a folded note jammed under my windshield wiper. "Don't park here again. You've been warned." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about a truck anymore. It was a power play. A way for Brad to mark territory, to send a message. I do what I want. I wasn't the only one noticing it either. Across the street, old Mrs. Harper stopped me during her morning walk. "That boy's trouble," she said, glancing toward Brad's house. "He blasted music until 1 a.m. last night. My cat hasn't come out from under the bed since." Another neighbor, Pete, a quiet guy who kept to himself most of the time, approached me that same afternoon. "Brad parked on my lawn yesterday," he muttered. "Said he'd move it in a minute. Left it there for 2 hours. Tore up the grass and didn't say a word." The stories kept piling up. Trash cans knocked over. Loud parties with shouting and car engines revving past midnight. He once set up a punching bag on the sidewalk, yelling at it shirtless like he was training for a cage match. But for me, the driveway situation kept getting worse. One Saturday morning, I found Brad's truck completely sideways across both my driveway and part of the street, making it impossible to back out or drive past. When I rang the bell, he opened the door still chewing on a protein bar. "You know what, Tom?" he said, flexing for no reason. "You're too uptight. You need to chill. It's just a truck." "That's not the point," I said through gritted teeth. "You're blocking my property." "Bro," he said, stepping closer. "It's not like you're going anywhere important." He grinned and closed the door in my face. That night, I called the police. 2 officers showed up, a man and a woman. They were polite, even sympathetic. But after looking at the situation, the male officer shook his head. "I hate to say it," he said, "but local ordinance doesn't clearly define how far a car has to be from a residential driveway unless it's marked. Technically, he's within the limits." "You're telling me he can keep doing this?" I asked, incredulous. The officer sighed. "Unless there's damage or obstruction of emergency access, we can't ticket him." Brad came out halfway through the conversation, shirtless again, holding a can of energy drink. "Hey officers," he said with a fake friendly tone. "Everything good?" They gave him a verbal warning, more of a suggestion, really, and left. As soon as they drove off, Brad raised his can toward me in mock salute. "Nice try, hero." That night I sat in my darkened living room, staring out at the glowing taillights of his truck and listening to the muffled bass of whatever garbage EDM he was blasting this time. I felt powerless, like the rules didn't matter, like common decency had vanished with the ink on the town's zoning laws. But something shifted in me. It was small at first. Just a flicker of resolve. If I couldn't count on the police, I'd document everything. The next day, I bought a set of surveillance cameras and motion-sensing floodlights. My daughter Lauren, who was home from college, helped me set them up. We mounted one under the eave pointing at the driveway, another across the lawn angled toward the curb, and one at the back just in case. By the following weekend, we had hours of footage, Brad pulling in, blocking the drive, flipping off the camera, even yelling at my trash can for looking at him weird. Meanwhile, the neighborhood buzz was growing louder. Mrs. Harper caught him tossing empty beer bottles into her recycling bin. At 2 a.m. Pete spotted him spitting sunflower seeds on someone's welcome mat. One of the younger couples had their baby's nap time destroyed by Brad blaring country rap at full blast while doing kettlebell swings in his driveway. "He's like a walking HOA violation," the wife told me. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I walked door to door and asked the neighbors to write down what they'd experienced. At first, I thought they'd brush me off. But to my surprise, people welcomed the idea. Some had screenshots. Others had footage from their own security cams. A few even apologized for not speaking up sooner. By the end of the week, I had a folder stuffed with complaint letters, photos, and timestamps. That night, I sat at my dining table with Lauren and looked at the pile. "I think we've got enough," I said. "For the cops?" she asked. I shook my head. "For something better." She raised an eyebrow. "We're going to the city council." Real quick, if you've ever had a neighbor who made your life harder, comment number 1 below. Lauren leaned in, eyes wide. "You mean like a public hearing?" I nodded. "Exactly. It's time this stopped being just my problem." She smiled. "All right, Dad. Let's go full civic justice." The next morning, I called the city council's public office. I explained the situation and requested a slot to speak at the next open meeting. The clerk was sympathetic and told me I'd need to file a formal petition in advance, with evidence and statements. "Bring community support," she added. "That always helps." I already had that. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a man on a mission. Lauren helped me organize all the materials. We digitized the videos, sorted photos into labeled folders, and transcribed the neighbors' testimonies into signed affidavits. Pete offered to help with formatting. Mrs. Harper brought over cookies and volunteered to speak in person. Word spread fast. A dozen neighbors, some of whom I barely knew before, signed up to speak, or at least show up in support. People who'd never even made eye contact with each other on trash day were now bonding over a shared nemesis named Brad. But we weren't stopping at just the city council. Robert, a retired civil attorney who lived 3 doors down, showed up on my porch one afternoon with a stack of papers in hand. "I heard what you're organizing," he said. "I've been quietly documenting Brad for months. I can help you build a civil case." "You're kidding," I said, stunned. He handed me a folder. "Parking violations, noise complaints, even one video of him keying someone's car. My nephew's a municipal judge. He says we've got a real shot if we pursue this." That night, we met in my living room, Robert, Lauren, Pete, and me. A strategy formed. Step 1: Public exposure. Step 2: Formal complaint to the city. Step 3: Civil court if needed. "This isn't just about revenge," Robert reminded us. "It's about reclaiming our street." We dubbed it the Maplewood Movement. Corny, maybe, but it felt like a flag to rally behind. Brad, meanwhile, was none the wiser. He was still strutting shirtless up and down the block, blaring bad music and tossing protein bar wrappers onto other people's lawns. He had no idea a dozen households were actively preparing to legally dismantle his backyard kingdom. The real spark, though, came when Brad took things one step too far. One Friday evening, I returned from running errands to find a handmade wooden sign staked into my front lawn. It read, "No parking, residential access only, trespassers will be towed." It was clearly Brad's handiwork. The font was the same as the warning note from my windshield. The sign was painted in neon yellow and planted like it belonged there. He had claimed my lawn as his property. I yanked the sign out and stormed across the street. This time, I didn't knock, I shouted, "Brad! We need to talk. Now." He came out holding a beer, as casual as ever. "You got a problem, old man?" "Yeah," I snapped. "You put a sign on my lawn." He grinned. "Gotta mark the area. You've been parking too close. You don't get to dictate where I park on my property. You don't get to whine every time I park like a normal guy." "You're not parking," I said. "You're blocking. There's a difference." He laughed and walked back inside. That was it. The next day, I filed the formal complaint with the city. A week later, I got a reply. We were on the next council meeting agenda. The entire neighborhood turned up that night. It was surreal walking into the community hall and seeing nearly every seat filled with familiar faces, people who had, until recently, been just passing nods or half smiles. Lauren brought a projector. Pete printed handouts. Robert had binders with tabs. We were ready. When my turn came to speak, I stepped up to the podium, took a deep breath, and looked at the 5 council members seated behind the long desk. "My name is Tom Reynolds," I began. "I've lived in Maplewood Hills for over 20 years. What started as a parking issue with one neighbor has turned into something much bigger, something that's affecting the safety, peace, and unity of this entire community." I clicked the first slide, Brad's truck, sideways across my driveway. Then came photos of the barricade cones, the lawn sign, the overflowing trash, and screenshots of his midnight parties. I played video clips, Brad mocking my cameras, yelling at other residents, and taking up 2 or 3 parking spaces at a time. Each testimony brought nods and murmurs of agreement. When I was done, I turned to the crowd. "If anyone else has experienced harassment, disruption, or property violations, I invite you to speak." And they did. Mrs. Harper spoke first, her voice trembling but firm. Then Pete, then a single mom who said her toddler woke up crying every night because of Brad's stereo. A quiet man at the back admitted Brad had once threatened him for walking his dog too close. By the end of it, the council had heard from over a dozen voices. The final speaker was Robert. Calm, precise, professional. He ended with a simple line. "Brad is not just a bad neighbor, he is a community hazard." When the meeting adjourned, one council member took me aside and said, "We've never seen a turnout like this. You've made your case loud and clear." A week later, the city issued a cease and desist letter to Brad for public nuisance and unauthorized use of public right-of-way. They also informed him that any future violations would result in fines and possible litigation. The letter was hand-delivered. Lauren and I watched from our window as Brad opened the envelope on his porch and read it. His confident stance wilted like a balloon with a slow leak. That same night, for the first time in months, his truck was parked in his own driveway. For a while, things actually got quiet. Brad's truck stayed in his driveway. The music turned down. The protein shake parade stopped. He even began cutting his lawn again, though he did it with the same grim expression as a man forced to apologize with a mouthful of vinegar. But nobody was fooled. We all knew it wouldn't last. 3 weeks later, I got the letter. Brad was filing a counter-complaint, accusing me of harassment, defamation, and community manipulation. That last one almost made me laugh. Manipulation? All I had done was give people a voice. Still, it meant one thing: we were going to court. Robert immediately stepped in. "He's bluffing," he said, flipping through the notice. "But we'll treat it seriously. The judge won't appreciate these kinds of tactics, especially not with the amount of evidence we've built." Lauren nodded. "Let's bury him in truth." The date was set, March 14th, County Civil Court. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. Not in a fancy suit, but something simple, clean, respectful. Lauren pressed my collar while Sarah handed me a packed folder of documents. "Whatever happens," she said, "you've already won the neighborhood back." We arrived at the courthouse early. The lobby smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Brad arrived 10 minutes later, dressed like he was going clubbing, tight jeans, flashy belt, button-up shirt open to his sternum. His lawyer, a slick man in a shiny gray suit, looked like he came straight out of a billboard ad. Brad gave me a smug half-smile as we entered the courtroom. He wouldn't be smiling long. The room wasn't huge, but it was packed. Neighbors filled the benches. Mrs. Harper sat near the front with her knitting needles. Pete had even taken the day off work. There was a quiet buzz in the air, a sense of long-awaited justice. The judge, a tall, sharp-featured woman with eyes that looked like they'd seen every excuse in the book, entered, and the room fell silent. We rose. The hearing began. Brad's lawyer went first, speaking with dramatic flair. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of illegal activity, but of neighborhood politics taken too far. My client, Mr. Taylor, has simply been exercising his rights as a homeowner, parking on a public street, enjoying his property. He has now been subjected to months of coordinated harassment by his neighbors, led by one man, Mr. Reynolds." I didn't react. Robert had warned me, let them talk. Don't give them the satisfaction of looking rattled. Brad sat back like a smug villain in a courtroom drama. Then it was Robert's turn. He stood calmly, placed a thick binder on the table, and opened to the first page. "Your Honor, we will be presenting documented evidence of repeated violations, parking obstructions, noise disturbances, threats, and property encroachments. Our goal is not punishment, but protection. The community deserves to live in peace." He began laying out our case. Photos of Brad's truck blocking driveways. Videos of his cones and homemade signs on public property. Audio clips of late-night music and yelling. Statements from over a dozen residents. Footage of Brad mocking neighbors and flipping off cameras. Every time Robert clicked to a news slide or read a news statement, Brad shrank further into his chair. At one point, Robert played a short video clip, Brad walking across my yard, planting that ridiculous, "no parking" sign while muttering, "Let's see him whine about this." The judge paused the video. "Is that Mr. Taylor's voice?" "Yes, Your Honor," Robert said. Brad's lawyer cleared his throat. "Out of context." The judge raised a hand. "I can recognize context just fine, Counselor." Then came the testimonies. Mrs. Harper spoke softly but clearly. "I haven't slept well in months. He blasts music at all hours. He once yelled at me for walking my dog past his house." Pete testified next. "He left beer cans on my lawn. Spit sunflower seeds on my porch. It's not just inconsiderate, it's hostile." More followed. A young mom described how her baby's sleep schedule was ruined. An older couple showed photo evidence of Brad parking halfway onto their front lawn. The final nail came from Lauren, who presented the street diagram we had made. It detailed every time Brad had blocked an access point, marked in red. "This is not a neighbor," she said. "This is a menace. If you think Tom did the right thing by standing up, hit that like button to show your support." When the judge finally turned back to Brad, she looked disappointed. "Mr. Taylor," she said, "I've seen some petty disputes in my time, but rarely do they come with such overwhelming and consistent documentation. You've clearly made life difficult for multiple families over many months." Brad stood, flustered. "This is all exaggerated. They're just mad that I don't want to be part of their little street club." The judge didn't flinch. "Mr. Taylor, you have the right to remain independent. What you don't have is the right to obstruct driveways, harass neighbors, and treat public property like your own. I hereby order the following. All nuisance behavior must cease immediately. All unauthorized signs, cones, or barriers are to be removed. You are to park within your designated property lines at all times. A civil fine of $2,500 is imposed for repeated public obstruction. Legal fees and damages will be paid to Mr. Reynolds." The gavel hit. Brad opened his mouth to argue, but his lawyer tugged on his sleeve. "It's over," the man whispered. The courtroom slowly emptied as neighbors clapped me on the back and thanked me. Mrs. Harper handed me a butterscotch candy and smiled. "You did it, Tom." Lauren grinned and held up her phone. "That last slide? Already on the community Facebook group. You're a legend now." But the best moment came when we stepped outside and saw Brad, staring at the courthouse wall like it had personally betrayed him. He turned, gave me one last glare, then trudged off without saying a word. We didn't need a parade or champagne. Victory tasted a lot like peace. Know someone dealing with a nightmare neighbor? Share this story, they might need the inspiration. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I stepped onto my porch and felt stillness. The street was quiet, but not the tense kind. It was the kind of quiet that let you hear wind in the trees, kids riding bikes again, sprinklers ticking rhythmically across trimmed lawns. The kind of quiet you don't notice until it's gone, and then miss with your whole heart. Brad's truck? Parked in his own driveway. Like it always should have been. The garish cones? Gone. The neon signs? Pulled up and trashed. His front yard gym had mysteriously disappeared overnight, and the late-night parties? Not a single one since the court ruling. He kept his head down after that. We passed each other a few times on trash day, no words, just averted eyes and awkward silence. A far cry from the smug smirks and condescending shrugs of before. But I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for peace. And I had it. In the weeks following the hearing, the neighborhood transformed. It wasn't just the absence of Brad's chaos, it was the presence of something new. Something stronger. Unity. One sunny Saturday, we hosted a neighborhood brunch. Just folding tables in my yard, some homemade muffins from Mrs. Harper, coffee in paper cups, and stories shared like old friends around a fire. Robert, the retired lawyer, proposed forming a small civic circle. Not a full HOA, just a volunteer-based committee to help mediate disputes and keep communication open. Nothing too official, he said with a chuckle. Just enough to remind folks that we're stronger when we look out for each other. People jumped in without hesitation. Pete offered to design a simple community bulletin. Lauren set up a group chat and email list. A young couple down the block volunteered to organize seasonal events, Halloween decorations, block parties, you name it. It felt like we'd taken all the frustration, all the silence and fear Brad had planted, and grown something good from it. A few weeks later, I got a knock at the door. It was Robert, holding a framed certificate with a small ribbon. "We thought this belonged with your other medals," he said. The plaque read, "To Tom Reynolds, for standing up, speaking out, and bringing us together." It was signed by every household on the block. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. I blinked more than I probably needed to. Sarah helped me hang it on the wall in my study, right between my fire department commendation and a photo of Lauren graduating college. Not because it was more important, but because it meant just as much. It wasn't a reward for fighting. It was a reminder that the fight had been worth it. That night, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the sky turned that perfect golden blue, I sat back on my porch with a cup of tea in hand. Across the street, I saw the Stevens boys playing basketball again. Mrs. Harper waved from her rocking chair. Somewhere, someone had a grill going. The air smelled like fresh grass, grilled burgers, and, for the first time in months, hope. Lauren stepped out, holding her laptop. "Hey, the city just emailed me," she said, sitting beside me. "They've added a community dispute resource page to the town website. You're literally mentioned in it." I raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" She laughed. "You're basically the face of suburban resistance now." I chuckled. Great. Just what I always wanted. But deep down, I was proud. Not for being in a newsletter or a community memo, but for what it all stood for. That one man, with nothing more than a folder of evidence, a daughter who believed in him, and a few good neighbors, could take back what mattered. His peace. His dignity. His driveway. This wasn't just a story about parking. It was about boundaries. About standing up to selfishness, even when the law drags its feet. About the power of a voice that refuses to be silenced. In the end, Brad didn't just lose a court case. He lost control over a neighborhood that refused to be bullied. And we gained something better than revenge. We gained each other. Love stories where justice wins? Subscribe now so you don't miss the next wild ride. Sometimes standing up for what's right starts with something as small as a blocked driveway. This story isn't just about one man's battle with a disrespectful neighbor, it's about boundaries, both literal and moral. It reminds us that when someone repeatedly violates your space, your patience, and your peace of mind, you have every right to say, "Enough is enough." Tom Reynolds didn't fight back with anger. He fought with integrity, unity, and truth. And that's a lesson for all of us. Justice doesn't require power, just persistence. When laws seem too slow or vague, the strength of a community speaking in one voice can move mountains. This tale also shows how one voice, when brave enough, can inspire others to act. In the end, it wasn't just Tom who won. It was the entire neighborhood that reclaimed their peace, their dignity, and their shared values. In a world where people often look the other way, this story is a reminder: don't stay silent when wrong is being done right outside your door. Because sometimes, doing the right thing means doing the hard thing, and that's what builds real community.